Aftermath, and we got a special guest today that we have JC, Dr. Doornick, and he's also known as Dragon. We got to hear a little bit more about that, but we want to tell you a little bit about his background and find out what he has to say. And of course, our illustrious co-host and mine, Kendra, is with us as well. So welcome to the show, JC. Thanks for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Nice to be with you. I always like to begin anytime I have the opportunity to share with a little bit of gratitude, and just recognizing in this moment that I just can't believe that I've somehow found a way to become a person that people want to hear talk. So it's an interesting thing. I grew up most of my life as somebody that was told he talked too much, and somehow I just didn't think that was a good idea to listen. So I just became somebody that talked too much, which means I lived most of my life with my foot in my mouth. But somehow I've just managed to come to you today as somebody that's made a living out of that, speaking on stage in front of 15,000 people at times now. And my wife and I own an international coaching company, and, we're responsible for taking care of hundreds of thousands of people. Once again, me talking a lot. So just in this moment right now, I just want you to know how much I respect both of you and your show and the mission of this show. And it's an honor to be here.
Thanks.
So little background, is that what we want?
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your background. You bet.
Okay. So I'll take a 51-year background and wrap it up in a cute little bow right now for you. Grew up in a very, very, safe, psychological safe haven. Everybody has money, kind of from the outside in. Very, very fortunate childhood, and went through what everybody probably wished they had as a childhood. I had a sister and, two loving parents, sports, great friends, we lived on the beach, beautiful, everything was perfect. Back in the day where you at 7 or 8, you could ride your bike to school and not worry about being killed and things like that, back in those days.
Today.
Right.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
And back in the day. So I must be dating myself talking about a time where a kid could ride a bike around and not be afraid of dying. So in any case, my story is very, very interesting in that, it's you're in this paradise, but then, you witness a trouble in paradise, and we will get to that maybe in a little bit about, just at a young age experiencing the beginnings of the dismantling of a divorce between my family, which at the time, at that current time, how does a kid even know what that means? So we'll probably get into that. But anyway, I've been through, I like to say that I was messed up and now I'm blessed up. I understand what it's like through my story, and we'll get some more about that out, to just move from a dark place and be in the light, and just really, really go through some tough times of struggle, and then find my way out of that hole, which makes you really, really appreciate what it's like to be out of the hole in the light, which is kind of how I've manifested, my life. I just flipped a switch one day, decided I was never going to go back to that, that way of just being in a dark, depressed space, wanting to end my life, and places like that, but then coming out and just having your confidence and certainty come back into you. So I just made a decision, in various ways. I became a chiropractor. I was a successful chiropractor. I became a international humanitarian. I got Humanitarian of the Year awards and all of this stuff. I was in Haiti for the earthquakes, built homes and orphanages and fed people. Been all over the world. I guess trying to save it, which is a tough job. But I found myself best suited in the role of the servant. And one thing led to another, and I found my niche, as a transformation coach and a podcaster and all of these just interesting things that I do right now. But I find myself now somebody that is living what I call an integrated life. And that's what I feel so blessed. And what I mean by an integrated life is, I have a wonderful career where I make a lot of money, and I have options, and all the things that probably people are trying to get, but integrated, meaning I've done that and built that around the things that matter most, which took me a lifetime to understand, spending time with friends and family and all of that stuff. So it's a pretty complicated and interesting story. I hope we can get some of it out. But my wife now, and we just adopted a little girl, and I have 2 older boys. I was previously married. We can talk a little bit about that. But we travel all over the world. My little girl that we adopted goes to school online, so she can come with us. And it's just like, I don't know. I just feel like we wake up every day, and you have a choice to either create the foolish illusion that everything is wonderful, or the foolish illusion that everything's a mess. And I'm just a fool for thinking that everything's amazing now. So that's the place that I'm in right now. And as you can imagine, and we'll get into the relevance of and the pertinence of things that you guys like to talk about, but messed up to blessed up. So that's who I am.
I absolutely love that quote, messed up to blessed up. I wrote that down. I might have to use that later. So it's very interesting, right? Because I don't think a few years ago we would have thought that we could homeschool our children and travel around the world. So you are very lucky, and your daughter is very, very lucky. So I'm glad you're at that place in your life.
Thank you.
Can you talk to Mick and I a little bit about your upbringing and the trauma you experienced with your parents and through the divorce? And you went into a very dark place, but how you maybe transitioned from that. So
yeah, this is really because, when we were talking about my, divorce and my, custodial rights of my kids and all that stuff of my boys, you guys notice that I have like a little bit of a different story. But I think what's relevant is where that was, birthed. So just quickly, I was 11 years old. Well, actually, let me tell you in a different way. When I was at my darkest place, I found myself in a chair sitting across from the person that I never wanted to see in my life. I was about 36. And I found myself sitting in a chair across the room was a therapist, a psychologist. And she was basically there asking me why I wanted to kill myself. So that was like the pinnacle and I had a great job and all of these things. And just one day, all of a sudden, I completely lost all of my confidence, and I became confused. And I just thought that I just didn't understand what to do. I didn't know which way to turn. So I started talking about turning the lights out. So that's when people start to go, whoa, So thank God my mom was around in my life at the time, and she brought me to a therapist. And I went through a conversation with the therapist, and this is when I found the light. Just one visit with the therapist, and she started asking me questions. She started saying, "Well, when did this start?" And I started to tell her I was on a train going into the city, and boom, I can't explain it. I just all of a sudden went from being the most confident person in the world, borderline cocky, to just like not feeling like I could even spend another day alive, So I didn't understand how that happened. So she's like, okay, and the story is all in its entirety in my book that's coming out. But so, we started to go down, and she started to ask more questions about it. And she, directed the questions kind of towards, well, what time of the year was it? And I said it was July. And she says, well, is there any relevance of that? And I said, oh yeah, it's my birthday. And she goes, well, tell me about your birthday. And I go, oh, I hate my birthday. I don't like to talk about my birthday. I don't like when people give me presents, and I just hate my birthday. I just never wanted anybody to even know it was my birthday. And she was like, huh, that's interesting. She says, well, what's the relevance there? And I'm like, nothing. I just don't even like talking about it. So she bypassed that, and she says, well, tell me about your parents. And I said, oh, my parents, I never see my dad. My parents got divorced. And then boom, something happened in that moment. And this was her retracing with me. And this, I just it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I call it, I had a snap moment. And right there in that moment, it's just like, I refer to the visual of a crazy wall. It's like all these things happen in our lives, like a detective wall where they have the pins and the red yarn connecting all of the
Right.
things. They're trying to find out like who the criminal is or the head boss. It's like, boom, all of a sudden my crazy wall turned into an evidence board. And it's like, it all just made sense in a snap, just like that. And I just froze. And she was like, what's wrong? And I just realized when I was 36, it was the first time that I put this together, that when I was 11 years old, I walked into my house on my birthday, and I was supposed to have like a bowling party and all of this fun stuff. And my friends were coming over in this perfect world that I lived in. Right. And I just remember I walked in the door and I saw my mom in her underwear, which is not normal. Right. She's in her like underwear, standing at the base of the stairs in our house crying. Right. And I was like, I was coming home for my birthday. I thought I was going to get like pummeled with like balloons, chocolate, and cake, So and I said, what's wrong, Mom? And she says, your father's leaving us. Now, my dad was always away traveling. So I didn't really understand what that meant. I was like, oh, where's he going? And my mom looks at me and she says, your father wants a divorce and he's leaving us. So, I just remember distinctly at 11 years old, like all I knew how to do was like nervously lick my lip. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, can I go out and play with my friends? Like, I didn't know what divorce meant.
Right. You're 11. How do you process that? Right.
I'm 11. And God bless my mom. She didn't understand, what was going on. But all I knew right there is that my birthday just got bumped. Mm-hmm. And there was something going on. And, and that led to later that night, my mom saying, get out of here. You're not sleeping in my bed anymore. And I heard all that, but I had to go explain to my friends that the birthday was off and make up some sort of story. So what I did in that moment is at 11 is I just took that and I just pretended it didn't happen. And I put it under the carpet. And I just realized that every year during my birthday, I didn't know why, but I hated my birthday. I didn't figure it out until I was 36. So as soon as I made that, and to listeners out there that are having a rough time, when you're in a dark place and you don't know how to get out, there could be a ladder standing right in front of you to climb out, but you can't see it. Right. But I just want listeners to know that there is a ladder, and all you have to do is put a couple of things together that very much have to do with, it's not your fault. What happened back then was directly correlated to who you were, right? And where you were in life. You didn't have the ability to understand things. But I swear I walked out of that place that day and I said, I'm never going back to that dark place again, ever. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping others not go back to that, ever experience that place. So I think that was the birth of the dragon, first of all, right? You asked me about that, but also just the birthplace of me becoming a borderline obsessed servant of others. And so that's a lot. There's a lot of other growth process after that, but that's how I've become a successful person. Is I really, truly enjoy helping others, avoid unnecessary dark holes and experiencing joy in their life.
So if you start then to say, all right, I'm going to be an adult, and then you get married. And so what we're expecting now is you lived happily ever after, right? Isn't that what happened as an adult?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that and the relevance is that, of course, I made a decision that I would never do that to my children, never get divorced, right? Married my childhood best friend, and like the perfect scenario, actually from the same town. And I just remember when I got married, like my number one goal of marriage was to never get divorced and never put my kids through that. So that was another lesson is, we just, I don't know. I think that we just probably grew apart because I was just growing so fast in life and doing humanitarian work and all that stuff. And she would just kind of be standing there with her arms crossed, like, what about me? So, what I want you to know is that my ex-wife and I are like best friends. If I have anything, any sort of a crisis, she's going to be there, like maybe even the first person show up. So we have a wonderful relationship. But what's interesting about it is that our marriage didn't succeed, but because of my trauma, I became like the world's greatest ex-husband. Like I was telling Kendra, like if you ever die and come back to life, you'd want to be my ex-wife, in many ways. So the trauma that I experienced, it didn't manifest as a good marriage, but what it did do is it made me take so many necessary steps to just completely position my ex-wife in the eyes of my children and in my eyes as just a massive priority. I actually took way better care of my ex-wife after we got divorced than while I was married to her. So it's an interesting thing, because I come to you now, I'm remarried, we have a daughter, we just adopted her and all that stuff. But the trauma that I went through as a child, watching my dad not do any of this stuff right with my mom. My mom was just like left to raise two kids, and my dad would go away for like a year at a time and come home and be like, hey, here's some gifts before I leave again, that kind of thing. So I know you guys talk about like custodial rights and stuff. It's like they didn't have to figure that out. He was never home, right? So my mom like just had us all the time. So what's interesting though about that, and I don't know if anybody out in the audience can relate to this, but I took this high road and made a decision to do the right thing by my ex-wife. Gave her, and I started making a lot of money, so I paid her above and beyond what I had to pay. We didn't need any attorneys or any of that stuff. There was no fighting. We sat down and I said, "What do you need?" And I gave her more, right? Which is not easy to do because you go through economic changes in life, but I still put her first. She's my highest paid employee. You know what I'm saying? So I made her feel safe and sound, but I also wanted the kids to know, because this is not what I saw. A couple of things. I wanted my kids to see that I was taking very good care of their mother, because I want my kids to grow up, be respecting their mom. Like I went through a phase where I blamed my mom for my parents' divorce. I didn't want that for my kids. So I did that. And I also wanted her to be happy, right? I didn't want her to like label me as a deadbeat dad or anything like that. So, but I also wanted her to be happy. But I wanted my children, I would say now, just giving to you like live and raw right now, I think a big premise of it too is I didn't want my kids to have the post-divorce trauma that I had as a kid. So I wanted them to see that even though we were divorced, their mother came first. The downside of that is that I trained my boys to always choose her first. So we didn't really set up custodial rights. It was like we kind of did it the way that the kids wanted to do it. It was focused on the kids, as I think it should be. Because sometimes I think parents selfishly say, you go here now, you go there now, and they don't understand that these are just little kids. But I trained my kids to go more with their mom and understand what my role is. So I have a wonderful relationship with my kids. But as I was saying, I kind of like pushed my way out of a lot of time with my kids. I mean, I was just down the road, but my kids lived with her, and so I started losing the ability to like know what it was like to see them wake up all the time and all that stuff. So there's some trauma associated with that, but I feel very good about what I did, and I believe my boys now at 19 and 17 look at me differently than I look at my dad. I think they look at me with respect, and also I'm watching my boys highly respect women. Like when they date girls and stuff like that, that's what I think my biggest accomplishment is.
That's huge. Thank you for sharing.
And I was curious now, that might give some hints and tips actually to say, be a good ex-husband and a person
easier said than done.
Yeah,
I wonder if I hadn't had that, I wonder if I hadn't had that trauma, cause like, I didn't want anyone else to feel that way, namely my kids. I wonder if I hadn't gone through that, if I wouldn't have taken that so seriously. I could see, because there were moments where I was angry and like say, this is not fair. You know, there were many, many moments like that. But the trauma that I went through as a kid was more powerful than my weaknesses in those moments. So I held back from starting an argument and going below the line of responsibility in my life. So, you know, that's what's interesting. It's like, we really do learn from our trauma. But, you know, if you really, really stop and pull back from your knee-jerk reaction when you get angry and things like that, and you give yourself a little bit of time. Viktor Frankl, you know, an amazing, you know, human being, wrote, you know, Viktor Frankl, he always talks about that the win happens between the stimulus and your response, the space between. So if you can pause and you can cognitively distance yourself from your knee-jerk reaction, you have the ability to grab a more rational, logical, you know, thought and plan of action and response. So that's what I was good at, is I had the ability to check back and say, wait a second, do you want to start yelling right now and potentially traumatize your kids like you were? So that's the blessing. So I go back now, and I wrote this in my book about that moment. You know, I felt so sorry for myself when I went back and remembered that 11-year-old moment. But it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because, you know, I'm now in this place now where my kids, you know, look at me and say, that's my dad, you know, and all the accomplishments and money that I've made and all these people that I've helped, that's all super cool, but nothing better than having your kid point to you and say, yeah, that's my dad. You know, I mean, what else is important?
That is wonderful. Yeah. So you taught your sons a lot on how to respect women, and I think just being a good dad. And I'm wondering how you're preparing your daughter for life, right? Because that's a different side of things.
So first of all, you got to understand how this little girl came into my life, because the best part of all of this enlightened awakening and becoming a more conscious human being, and having the ability to like see things as they are, not as you've been programmed to see them. You know, that's the biggest problem, is everybody has been like programmed by their mother, father, teacher, preacher, and their life experience in society. So of course they go off the handle, right? So my daughter has come into my life as a very, very highly conscious person that has the ability to think before I do things. So first thing I realized, you know, when I was in my single days, you know, 7 years I was single, you know, I mean, I dated a little bit, massive failures all over the place. But during those 7 years, I had this extremely vivid dream over and over again, 3-4 times a week, that I had a daughter. Same girl every dream, you know, as a baby, as a toddler, you know, walking her down the aisle, the same thing. So, and it was a pleasant dream. It was just an amazing dream. I felt like I had a daughter. Now, you don't go around telling people you're having pleasant dreams about a little girl, right? So it was like it was like my secret. But what's odd is, and I believe that, you know, I believe we do have control over manifesting our realities. I meet this girl on a dating app, and for whatever reason, I reach out to her, right? And we just hit it off immediately. And, you know, we start going through the process of moving very fast. Like, you know, it's like, boom, 7 years in waiting. And I finally found the girl, and just boom. And 2 weeks into the relationship, she says to me, she goes, listen, you know, this is moving very fast. And by the way, you should know something about me. Like, these things happen to me all the time. Once you awaken and you start like really becoming conscious, there's all sorts of cool things happening. Most of the time we miss them. So she says, something you should know about me. And that is that my sister tragically died, you know, a couple of years ago, and left behind a little girl, my niece. And I just want you to know I come with a daughter. So of course I was like, whoa, you know, like when I heard that, I kind of got cold and clammy. So I said, can I see a picture of her? And hand to God, it's the girl I've been dreaming of. You know, so this is my dream child, and you can believe that or not, which is irrelevant. Gives me chills. Yeah, it should actually freak the heck out of you, because it's true. Yeah. And even crazier than that, when I finally met her, you know, she kind of felt the same thing. So anyway, that was a long time ago. So this little girl that, you know, my wife and I pre-COVID started the adoption process. What a mess that is. She's right behind this wall here. You know, she is just the greatest thing that's happened to me, but she's a daughter. I never had a daughter, but it's a different kind of a love, a dad and a daughter, you know. And I saw my dad and my daughter, but he was never around. I mean, my sister, but he was never around. So I didn't have a lot of, so, you know, I just feel like my role with her as the person I've become is to show her what a man is and how she should be treated and things like that. And I'm not always easy on her. But, you know, I just wanted to show her what unconditional love is. And, you know, she watches me hold the door for her mom and, you know, and just really, really show up, unlike my dad did. So it's kind of like the same thing, but I'm just now playing the role for a daughter, and her and my sons are like great friends. And of course they're her protectors and stuff, you know? So yeah, it's an amazing experience. Oh my God, she's amazing.
That's wonderful. How did you, I'm just curious, this popped in my head as you're talking. How did you become such a great man when you did not have a great role model per se?
You know, there's a quote that says, God only prunes the branches he wants to see grow. You know, I've got pruned, you know, I mean, I got beat down in life, emotionally, financially, physically. And I just somehow learned from it all. You know, it's like, I think I would say that I just became very, very humbled. I was a very cocky, overly confident person going the wrong way. 50% of the people that knew me probably hated me, and the other 50% just tolerated me. Right. So I remember this moment, one of my mentors, this was a pivotal moment and there's a lesson in it. I hired this guy, like a life coach. His name is Larry Markson. And I hired him just to help me with my business success and all of that stuff. And he was a very good public speaker, and I was starting to get some big gigs, and I wanted him to teach me how to be cooler, you know, and very, very unhealthy, cocky time of my life. And for anybody that's like that, you will hit a wall. And my wall was his name was Larry. So he said to me one day, he goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, what do you think people think about you? And I was like, so, you know, cocky me came out, and I'm like, 50% of them like me, 50% of them don't. And he goes, well, what do you think about the people that don't? And, you know, I don't want to swear on your show, but I used an F word and I said, F them. Right. So that's who I used to be. And he goes, that's what I thought you'd say. And then the next question he says, what's more important to you, JC, to be right or kind? And that was the moment that I realized that all I ever wanted to do. Oh.
Yeah, I think we have froze there.
Okay, are we good?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. So it says that there's some sort of connection issue, but he asked me, what's more important, to be right or kind? And I realized in that moment that all I was ever trying to do was be right. And he says, nobody ever got her from being right. Right. So that was a pivotal moment where I started to become kind, but it also was in conjunction of me like having my complete breakdown, because I opened up myself. I dropped my thick skin. So I believe that a human being needs to be torn down to its most fragile, humble place in order to grow into the person that you need to become. So what I teach people, it's kind of like the obstacle is the way, you know, embrace the suck. You know, I joke with my clients when they come to me and they go, oh my God, my life is a mess. It's like, I'm like, I am so jealous of your situation right now, because like God has mysteriously placed everything we desire conveniently on the other side of a big steamy pile of poop. And if you're in the poop right now, like, I'm excited for you. If you push through, but if you run from it and stay safe, I think you're going to struggle for the rest of your life. So if people are struggling right now, whether it's with custodial rights or any of those things, it's most likely you just running your old program and, doing what you've been taught to do. It's a bunch of crap, right? You know what the right thing to do is. And, you might need to work on things, but like everybody knows what the right thing to do is. But if you're running your program, and that's why we don't watch TV and we don't watch the news and all that stuff. We don't consume anything that can change our minds for the worse. There's just this wonderful, clear place where you start to enjoy your days, recognizing you don't even know if you have your next. Why would you waste time today just like reacting to things the wrong way,
It's one thing we haven't said anything about, but it's almost too obvious. It's part of your name, and also your wife has a nickname also. So I'm like, what has all this got to do with the animals and dragons and all this stuff?
Yeah, and then we call our daughter Ducky as well. So I'm Dragon, my wife is Chicken, and then our daughter's Ducky. But says she doesn't want that anymore. She just wants her regular name. But so my wife and I, when we were in those early phases, we used to communicate with each other using those little emojis, and she just was so good at being the chicken. So that's how she got Chicken. Dragon is a little bit more complicated because I always assimilate during these dark times in my life. And this is when my friends call me, we always talk about, because I've taught them this, we always talk about what dragons have you been slaying lately? So I always had this vision of the fire breathing dragon as, a symbol of going through tough times. Like I was always, look at the dragon and say, oh, the dragons are swooping right now. So the first thing I became was a dragon slayer. But then what's interesting about the whole concept of the monster in the closet, or the scary clown under your bed, right? Those are things that you make up in your mind, right? You can go into the closet, turn on the light, and there's not there. But as soon as you close the door, it's there again. So the only way that you can actually get past some of your fears is to get as close to them and embody them. So the reason why I became the dragon is because I decided to become my biggest fear and move in with the dragon. And like in Avatar, when they bond with those flying dragons, I bonded with the dragon. So when you hear me talk about myself as the dragon, that's my way of saying I took everything that I ran from and I was afraid of and just brought it in, let it be my roommate. So the dragon is the manifestation of me not just breaking through, but not foolishly thinking that I've gotten rid of something in my life. I take it with me and I use it as my strength.
It's odd that you mention it. It's odd that you're saying it because I say something similar when people ask me, how's your day? I say, I'm slaying dragons.
There you go, man.
I get it, because here I'm doing this stuff and I'm just trying to get through the day. And I also do it.
So take those dragons and just just wear them as a suit and you will stop slaying them. Yeah.
Every day. Yeah. And I do a thing called the Daily Dragon actually too, because I'm
oh, that's awesome. I'd love to hear about that. That's great.
I just do a little 5-minute thing every day. So here's the dragon.
Well, I do a 5-minute thing every day too, man. We might be brothers.
From another mother, but yeah, brothers. Got it.
Awesome.
Well, JC, you mentioned something about your book, and you alluded that more information would come out in your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So we can't announce the name yet because it's such a cool name, and we know that people will be like, "Oh, I should have used that." So the book is going to be released in hopefully about February. And what the book is, it's basically my journey of a lot of the stuff that I've talked about, but my journey and these 10 different instances that I experienced where I grabbed these gold nuggets and these signs and these insights that progressively, transformed and woke me up to becoming a more conscious human being. So the way the book is structured, it's a great book to read, but also it very much helps you go back and learn a different verbiage and a way of looking at your life so that you can look at your life like a past experience like that. What happened to me when I was 11? When that happened to me, I was 11. I had no experience. I had no ability to understand what had happened. But if I go back and look at that now through this lens and this new life and this new exposure to life, I can go back there and say, oh, what a blessing that was. So my book is about teaching people to create a different way of perceiving things, right? I teach a really cool way of slowing things down and controlling your response. I teach this interface response system because there's just such a beautiful life out there. Even, right now is a crazy, probably I'm 51, and it's probably the craziest that life has ever been. There's just so many factors in there. But yet I wake up every morning and I just embrace the day, and I just think that life is just amazing, and we're just so blessed to be here. And I just want, my book is about teaching people to awaken and reclaim control and become the dominant force in your life by eradicating a lot of these program things that, you think, our perceptions are usually controlled by something you've been taught, and it's just not true. We have the ability to look at things and really decide what they are, not be convinced into thinking that there's something. So my book is all about helping people make sense of things, and it's going to be a really, really cool experience.
That sounds awesome. We appreciate all the things that you had to share, some really insightful things and great biographical story. So if people are interested in reaching out to you, getting a hold of you, could you provide us some contact information? Because I think people would like to hear from you.
Easiest thing to do, and this would be a way of connecting with me on all levels, is if you go to riseupwithdragon.com. When you go there, it'll invite you to sign up for our free newsletter. That's going to give you access to lots of free stuff that we give away, but also this, the Dragon's Lair, one from the vault. That's a newsletter every week. And it'll also connect you with my podcast, Rise Up with Dragon. Case in point, that's obviously on all the platforms, Rise Up with Dragon. You can't miss that one. But every morning, Monday through Friday, Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m., I do what's called the Great Morning 5-Minute Rise Up. So there's our 5-minute connection, where I just help people, create a focus where they can remove the blindfolds from their mind and become the dominant force of their day, win the morning, win the day. So, that's got a big following, and that ends up being my podcast as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being our guest today, JC the Dragon. So that's it for this particular episode. We appreciate your time and all the great things and the tips and the handy things that you had been able to share with us today. Appreciate your time. And that's it for this particular episode of The Aftermath. Thanks for joining us. And make sure you're subscribing, you're liking, you're sharing, and you're positively reviewing The Aftermath. Thank you for everybody who's listening. I've had some really good news that people are listening, and show is growing. Thanks a lot. That's it for this particular episode. Take care. Bye now.
Thanks, JC. Bye.
Yes, well.